Megan had been enjoying a rare moment of peace, the kind of quiet that only came when her son, Luke, was out with his friends, laughing and joking somewhere she couldn't see. She sank into the soft couch in her living room, a mug of coffee warming her hands, and allowed herself to breathe, the tension of the week slowly leaving her shoulders. Her phone buzzed with a message from a neighbor, and she smiled, replying quickly when a sudden knock at the door startled her, the sound sharp in the empty house. She wasn't expecting anyone, not today, and her heart jumped as she set down her mug and moved toward the door, her curiosity mixed with a hint of caution. When she opened it, she froze for a moment, not because it was dangerous, but because it was Jason, her old college friend, standing there with that familiar grin, the one that used to make her stomach flutter. He looked older, more confident, but the same warmth lingered in his eyes, the same energy that had drawn her in years ago, and for a moment, Megan forgot to speak. "Hey, Megan," he said softly, and it sounded like home, like a memory she hadn't realized she missed. "Jason, hi," she managed, stepping aside to let him in, feeling an unexpected rush as he brushed past her into the living room, the air around them charged with something she couldn't name. They hugged, the kind of hug that was friendly but carried the weight of years, of shared experiences, of conversations that had ended too soon, and Megan felt a thrill she hadn't felt in a long time. Jason looked around the house, his eyes landing on familiar corners, and Megan realized how long it had been since she had seen him, how much had changed, and yet how some things felt exactly the same. They sat down on the couch, talking quickly, laughing as they remembered college parties, late-night study sessions, and silly pranks they had played on friends, the conversation flowing effortlessly. Megan noticed how easily he made her laugh, how naturally he fit into her life for this short visit, and she felt a pull she tried to ignore, a pull she hadn't expected to feel. Jason leaned closer at one point, asking about her work, about Luke, about her life in ways that felt personal, more than casual, and Megan found herself sharing more than she intended. His voice was calm, inviting, making her feel seen, the way a friend sometimes did but a stranger never could, and she caught herself staring, noticing the way he smiled when he listened, when he reacted. For a moment, she allowed herself to think about the past, about the connection that had always lingered just below the surface, the unspoken familiarity that made her heart race. She told herself it was harmless, just catching up, just enjoying a visit, but the warmth spreading in her chest told a different story, one she was only starting to understand. Then, without warning, the front door opened again, a sound that cut through the air like a sudden gust of wind, and Megan's stomach dropped. Luke stood there, holding his backpack, his eyes wide, staring at the scene in the living room, frozen as if the world had stopped around him. Megan's heart skipped a beat, a mix of guilt, fear, and a strange curiosity rushing through her, and she realized she had no idea how he would react. Jason noticed immediately, his posture shifting, stepping back slightly, his eyes flicking to Luke, a shadow of concern crossing his face, but Megan didn't move, didn't speak. She felt the weight of the moment, the silence stretching between the three of them, heavy and unbroken, and she could see Luke trying to process, trying to make sense of what he had walked into. "Mom, what's going on?" he asked quietly, his voice small, uncertain, carrying a mix of confusion and hurt that tugged at Megan's heart. She opened her mouth, wanting to explain, to calm him, to tell him it was nothing, that it was just a visit, just a friend, but the words stuck in her throat, trapped by the electricity of the moment. Jason's eyes met hers briefly, silently asking what to do, how to respond, and Megan shook her head, unsure, torn between the comfort of his presence and the sudden tension his presence had created. Luke didn't move, didn't take a step closer, just stood there, frozen in disbelief, and Megan realized how fragile this moment was, how quickly something ordinary had become complicated. She could feel the pull between herself and Jason, the familiarity, the long-lost connection, and she knew that pretending it didn't exist would be impossible, even in front of her son. Luke finally dropped his gaze, retreating to his room without another word, leaving Megan and Jason alone in the living room, the air thick with everything that had just happened. Jason sat down slowly, keeping a careful distance, and Megan felt the weight of her choices pressing on her chest, each heartbeat reminding her that some moments could not be undone. She realized that the day had changed in an instant, that a simple visit had become something far more intense, something that would linger in their minds long after he left. And as she sat there, staring at the spot where Luke had stood, Megan felt a mix of excitement and fear, knowing that this unexpected reunion had opened a door she hadn't planned to open. The quiet house felt different now, charged with anticipation, and Megan knew that nothing would be the same again. Not after today, not after this moment. She didn't know what would happen next, whether Luke would understand, whether Jason would stay in her life, but for the first time in a long while, she felt alive, aware of her own desires, and aware of the complicated path that lay ahead. The house felt heavier after Luke had retreated to his room, each step he took echoing down the hall like a warning Megan couldn't ignore. She sank back onto the couch, her hands gripping the edges, trying to make sense of what had just happened, trying to catch her breath from the shock of seeing her son frozen like that. Jason sat across from her, quiet now, his usual confident energy tempered by the tension in the room, and Megan felt a strange mixture of relief and anxiety, wondering if this moment had already changed everything. She wanted to speak, to explain, to fill the silence with something safe, but every word she considered felt wrong, too simple, too fragile to mend the unexpected damage. The air between them was charged, silent but loud, filled with emotions that weren't easy to name, and Megan realized that what she felt for Jason had not disappeared with time. It had only grown quieter, waiting. She watched him from across the room, noticing the way he leaned forward slightly, how his eyes softened when they met hers, and felt the pull of the past, the connection she had tried to forget. Her mind raced with questions and fears. Was it right to feel this way when her son had just seen her like that? Was it fair to Jason to carry tension she couldn't explain? Was it fair to Luke if this continued? Jason finally spoke, breaking the silence with a low, careful voice, asking if she was okay, and Megan felt a shiver at how tender he sounded, the kind of concern that reminded her why she had always cared for him. I don't know, she admitted, her voice quiet, almost a whisper, but it was enough to let him in, enough to let him see her vulnerability, the part she rarely showed anyone. He nodded slowly, understanding without pressing, giving her the space she needed while staying close enough that she felt comforted by his presence, and she realized how rare it was to feel this understood. Her thoughts kept drifting to Luke, imagining him in his room, trying to process what he had just seen, and her heart ached for him, aching for the way a mother feels when a child is confused, hurt, or unsure. She didn't want to hurt him, yet she couldn't deny what she felt for Jason, the connection that had sparked immediately, unexpectedly, and now refused to fade, and she felt torn between loyalty and desire. Jason reached for her hand briefly, just lightly, a gesture meant to reassure, and Megan's pulse quickened at the touch, a reminder that some emotions didn't wait for permission or circumstance. She pulled her hand back slightly, thinking of Luke, thinking of boundaries, thinking of the careful life she had tried to lead, but part of her resented the caution, resented how constrained she felt. Jason noticed the hesitation, his eyes questioning, and Megan shook her head, realizing she couldn't explain the pull she felt, couldn't rationalize why a moment could feel so important. They stayed like that for a while, sitting in silence, letting the weight of unspoken feelings fill the space. The room quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic outside. Luke's footsteps crept along the hallway, a reminder that he was still near, still processing, still watching in ways she couldn't see, and Megan felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She wanted to run to him, to hug him, to tell him it was okay, but she also wanted to stay where she was, feeling the warmth of Jason's presence, and the conflict made her chest ache. Time seemed to stretch, the minutes slow and heavy, but each second carried meaning, carrying tension, carrying desire, carrying the knowledge that nothing would go back to normal after today. Jason finally spoke again, asking if he could come back another day, and Megan felt a rush of relief and excitement, realizing that she wanted him to return, despite the complications, despite Luke, despite everything. She nodded, trying to hide the mix of emotions that swept over her, and Jason smiled, the kind of smile that made her heart lift, and for a moment, she almost forgot about the fear, the guilt, the shock. The room felt smaller, charged with unspoken possibilities, and Megan thought about the past, about missed chances, about moments she had let slip away, and she felt the pull of something new, something dangerous, something real. Luke's presence lingered like a shadow, even in his absence, reminding her that choices had consequences, that feelings had limits, and that life wasn't simple, no matter how much she wanted it to be. Megan stood up, pacing slightly, thinking about what she would say when Luke came back into the room, what she could do to keep him from feeling hurt, what she could do to protect the fragile trust between them. Jason watched quietly, patient and understanding, and Megan realized how rare it was to have someone who could hold space for her like that, who could wait without pressuring, without judgment, without expectation. She sat down again, her thoughts a whirlwind, imagining conversations she might have with Luke, imagining the way she might explain boundaries without denying what had happened, and feeling the tension in her chest. Her phone buzzed, and she nearly jumped, expecting it to be Luke checking in, but it was Jason, a simple message asking if she was okay, and Megan smiled softly, realizing the connection didn't need words to exist. She typed back quickly, telling him she was fine, but inside, her mind was spinning, full of emotions she couldn't yet name, full of possibilities she wasn't sure she was ready to explore. The sound of Luke's door opening again made her heart race, a reminder that this was real, that the world outside the living room hadn't paused, and that she needed to face the aftermath sooner or later. But for now, she stayed seated, letting the quiet stretch, letting the emotions settle just enough that she could breathe, letting Jason's presence remind her that life was messy, unpredictable, and full of moments she couldn't control. And as the afternoon sunlight shifted across the room, Megan realized that nothing had ended, nothing had been resolved, but something had changed forever, the way connections sometimes did, silently, in a single moment. She didn't know what Luke would think, what Jason would do, or what she herself would decide, but for the first time in a long time, she felt alive in the tension, alive in the uncertainty, alive in the moment. And as the shadows lengthened in the house, Megan understood that this was only the beginning, that choices were coming, that feelings would demand attention, and that the quiet after the storm was just the calm before everything else unfolded. Evening fell quickly, and the house felt quieter than it had all day, the kind of quiet that makes every sound sharper, every movement more noticeable, and Megan felt it pressing against her chest. Heavy with thought, she sat on the couch, staring at the empty space where Jason had been earlier, replaying the moments over and over, the laughter, the tension, the way their hands had almost touched, and she felt a mix of longing and guilt. Luke's footsteps moved softly down the hallway, then stopped, and she held her breath, wondering if he was coming out to talk, to ask questions, or to retreat again. Jason had left for the day, promising he would return soon, but his presence lingered in the room, in the corners, in the air. A reminder of the connection she hadn't expected, a connection that refused to be ignored. She thought about Luke, about the way he had frozen earlier, the shock in his eyes, and a wave of sadness passed through her, knowing she had complicated his world without meaning to, knowing that innocence sometimes collided with adult feelings in ways that were confusing. She wanted to call him, to tell him it was okay, that nothing had changed between them, that she loved him more than anything, but she hesitated, realizing that words could not fix everything, that some things needed time, needed understanding, needed patience. Megan stood and walked toward the kitchen, her steps slow, her mind racing with questions she didn't yet have answers to, about boundaries, about desire, about how one moment could shift everything so quickly. She leaned against the counter, hands gripping the smooth surface, thinking about Jason's visit, about the warmth she had felt, about the spark she hadn't realized she still carried, and wondered if it was wrong to feel alive in that way. The memories of college, of long conversations, of shared dreams, returned in flashes, and Megan realized that connection didn't just disappear with time. It waited, quiet, patient, ready to emerge when it could. Her phone buzzed again, and she glanced at it, seeing a simple message from Jason, asking if she was okay, and her lips curved into a small, tired smile, grateful for someone who cared without needing explanations. The quiet in the house made her think of the fragility of life, of how quickly feelings could surface, how quickly ordinary days could become complicated, and how difficult it was to navigate love and loyalty simultaneously. Luke's door opened again, and this time, he stepped out slowly, eyes lowered, trying to read her expression, searching for reassurance, searching for understanding, and Megan felt her heart squeeze. She walked toward him, keeping her voice calm and gentle, knowing that words mattered, knowing that tone could ease tension more than anything else. "Luke," she said softly, "I know today was confusing, and I don't want you to feel like anything has changed between us." And she watched his eyes flick up to meet hers, cautious but curious. He nodded slightly, still quiet, and she felt the fragile trust beginning to rebuild in the silence between them, the way love sometimes returned not in grand gestures, but in small moments of presence and honesty. She sat back down on the couch, and Luke joined her, keeping a respectful distance, and Megan realized that even in difficult moments, connection could survive, that understanding could grow if nurtured carefully. The house grew darker, shadows stretching across the floor, and Megan thought about the choices ahead, about Jason returning, about her own feelings, about the need to balance desire with responsibility. She knew she couldn't ignore her own heart, couldn't pretend the warmth she felt earlier didn't exist, but she also knew that family came first, that love for her son had to guide her, that boundaries were not just rules but protections. Jason had left his presence behind like a soft echo, a reminder that some connections could be both thrilling and complicated, and Megan wondered if she could navigate that complexity without losing herself or hurting those she loved. She reached for her phone again, typing a quick message to Jason, keeping it light, simple, careful, a way to maintain connection without crossing the line, without adding to the tension in the house. Luke watched her for a moment, curious, and she offered a small, reassuring smile, a signal that everything would be okay, that trust could be rebuilt, that life could continue even after surprises. The evening stretched on, and Megan thought about the day, about moments frozen in time, about emotions that didn't come with instructions or warnings, about the messy, beautiful reality of human connection. She realized that life was full of moments like this, moments that demanded honesty, patience, courage, and she felt a quiet strength rising in her, a reminder that choices mattered, but so did the ability to forgive, to understand, to feel. The house settled into a gentle rhythm, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant traffic, the occasional creak of the floor, and Megan felt a calm beginning to return, the way calm always followed tension, slow but certain. Luke eventually returned to his room, quieter now, thoughtful, and Megan watched him go, feeling a mixture of pride and concern, knowing that he was learning about the complexities of life, about emotions that didn't always make sense, about love in its many forms. She turned back to the empty living room, imagining Jason returning another day, imagining the conversations they would have, the laughter, the shared memories, and she felt anticipation, tempered by responsibility, tempered by care. Megan understood that life didn't have neat endings, that emotions didn't fit into simple boxes, that sometimes love, desire, and duty all collided in ways that were confusing but real. She sat back, letting herself breathe, letting herself feel, letting herself accept that the day had changed her in ways she hadn't expected, in ways that would shape her choices, her relationships, her understanding of herself. The sun set outside, painting the walls with fading light, and Megan felt a quiet peace settle over her, the kind of peace that comes from accepting complexity, from embracing emotion, from knowing that even in messy moments, life could be beautiful. She picked up her phone one last time before heading to the kitchen to start dinner, thinking about Jason, thinking about Luke, thinking about herself, and smiled softly, ready to face the days ahead with honesty, patience, and the knowledge that some connections were worth navigating carefully. And as she moved through the house, feeling the tension lift slightly, Megan realized that today had taught her more than any ordinary day ever could, about love, about family, about desire, and about the courage it took to face the unexpected without losing herself.